10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Game over.
Hey, Andrew. Can you hear me well? Yeah. All right. Well,
I'm feeling like I feel after most games this season.
Okay, hold on. Apparently, this is going to happen again. So, apparently I started that show muted, which is not my fault because stupid OBS selected the wrong mic. I don't know how that happened because I went in right before he started and put it on the right mic, and it defaulted back to another one. So, welcome to Game Over Montreal, everybody. The audio issues are a serious issue. So, for those watching right now, I know that we had some complaints over the last couple shows that the audio is a little bit quiet. Okay, so my focus has been to try to get the audio equalized between the Zoom input and my mic, which is a little bit louder. So that's been kind of the struggle. But for everybody watching, let me know if I need to turn up the audio. I turned it up a little bit for both the input and my mic for this show. So if it's still too quiet, let me know in the comments and I will jack it up a little bit until we get some interference and then people can say turn it down. But yeah, so to introduce everybody again, Nicolas Cloutier, or Nicolas,
Yes.
and
Nicolas.
Noha Beshir, two great people. We're going to be talking about the Habs tonight and what they keep on doing to their fan base, which is destroy them from the inside out.
Breaking my heart. They're breaking my heart.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to watch. And me and Andrew were talking about it before going live. This has to be their worst start in history, like statistically. And they're not that bad of a team. I mean, on paper, I wouldn't say like they're a crazy good team. They're pretty bland, pretty average, but they're playing like some expansion teams back in the day right now, which doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. And like you look at like Jay Fresh Hockey, who's a friend of the show, posted his like expected goals outcomes so far this season, and I think the Canadians were slotted in 19th. And like 19th isn't good. It's not a playoff team, but it's not 3-10 bad. Like this is pretty crazy. And I think that it's very difficult when you're a fan to look at what's happening and to not just see red, you know what I mean? And not the team colors, just like blind rage, because everything seems to be going wrong. Nothing really is working out except for like Nick Suzuki is finally red hot. But
Hoffman.
There's more here that's good than people think. And they're like, doesn't mean they're a good team, but there are some things that are going right. And like we talked about Hoffman in the chat while we were watching the game. He's been great. He's been fun to watch. One of the few guys who's actually like interesting to watch. He was good tonight. He didn't accomplish what they needed him to in the end, but I thought he was good.
No, he was good. I guess the thing is they aren't as bad as their record says, but here's the thing, like why did they keep if they would just embrace the badness for a couple of seasons and rebuild, and I've been screaming this from the rooftops for like, I feel like 10 years now. I don't know. They keep insisting on trying to be good, and all they come out with is mediocre. Just rebuild. This whole restart, retool, refresh, it doesn't work. Just rebuild the team.
Well, what I would say, Noha, is it starts from the top, and Jeff Molson doesn't give his approval for a rebuild to Marc Bergevin. He gives his approval for a retool or a reset or whatever you want to call it. But a GM in Montreal doesn't get an approval for a rebuild. So that's what happens right here. And the issue right now with tanking this entire season, I think, is disappointing because you're wasting entry-level years of Cole Caulfield, of Nick Suzuki, whose contract is gonna kick in next year. Or Alex Romanov, for that matter, he's not that good right now, but still. So you're wasting those years, and those years are so valuable for a team. And I don't know if it's a good idea in these circumstances to tank, but at this point, I mean, it sounds like the right course of action.
Well,
But
what's the difference? Like, if you're trying to tank or if you're not trying to tank, like, you may as
They'll
well
start winning.
yeah, they
Yeah,
don't
at
even have
least-
to try to tank. That's a good point.
No,
like,
I can already see what's gonna happen. Like you can read it in the stars, right? Is Carey Price is gonna come back
Oh,
after,
yeah,
like,
you
another
bet.
stretch, and he's gonna be healthy, mentally healthy, focused, and he's gonna play like 2014, 2015 Carey Price, put up like a 940 save percentage, and they're gonna finish like 3 points outside the playoffs and get a terrible pick, and
Yeah.
everyone will be
and then
really
we'll just
upset.
be right back here
Yeah.
next year.
Well,
And
well,
it
you know what?
never
Yeah.
ends.
You know what? Renaud Lavoie from TVA said something interesting. I think it was a week ago. He said, well, of course, Price doesn't score goals, but the team is just that different when he's on the ice. So I think the Canadians would have scored more goals with Carey Price instead of Jake Allen. And it's no offense to Jake Allen, but he doesn't inspire that much confidence to this team. I mean, if I would be a defenseman, if I would have been a Habs defenseman tonight, I wouldn't felt like really confident knowing he is behind me. I'm sorry, but he looks pretty shaky. Doesn't look composed. He doesn't have the aura that Price has. Price, when he's on this game, just looks like he's going to stop every damn puck, and you don't see that happening with Jake Allen. So you're right, Andrew. When Carey Price comes back, I think a lot of issues might be corrected, and they might actually start winning games, which will be pointless and would hurt the Habs' future.
Yeah,
Yep,
it's
year after year.
that's kind of one of the worst things about the NHL really is that if you're a team that needs to rebuild, you actively have to, or not have to, but you actively feel compelled to root against your own players being good, right?
Mhm.
Like you don't want your team to win down the stretch. Like that's a terrible feeling, and it's a terrible way to reward. Like that's kind of not where we really need to go in this show, but it is terrible to think that like there could be some joy in this season with Carey Price coming back, and if he plays spectacularly, and we're all talking what ifs,
Yeah.
right? But if that ends up ruining the
You know what,
potential of a
though?
top 5 pick,
But I think there's another way to look at this, because the Habs are so obsessed with trying to squeak into the playoffs. Like, I don't know what year we're on, and Andrew, we were talking about this a few days ago, right? They're on like year 10 of Bergevin's 5-year plan, right? So every year, well, we'll just make it into the playoffs and we'll see what happens. So, and his approach for making it into the playoffs, squeaking in, is to get a bunch of, third or fourth line guys and journeyman defensemen and play them at the expense of the kids. So these guys don't actually have any upside. They might be technically safer as far as he's concerned. They don't make any glaring mistakes, but the upside on them doesn't exist either. So
Yeah.
if they actually, instead of saying, like, if all they did to rebuild was give the kids the ice time and let them play and let them develop and let them make mistakes and then send them back out onto the ice for the next shift and the shift after that, instead of giving all that ice time to the, I don't know, like the guys who are just someone to plug a hole and aren't who you're going to build your team around, where would they be? Where will they be 2 or 3 years from now? And if they'd done that 2 or 3 years ago and so on and so forth, like they just keep bringing in, other than Corey Perry, I'm trying to remember who else they've brought in recent years that was just like a plug, who was really impactful.
I guess maybe it depends on if you consider maybe Joel Edmondson a plug,
Yeah.
right? Because I think I considered him to be not a very good signing last year, but I thought there was potential if he played with Petrie to have a decent season, but I didn't think that he could have the season that he had last year. Like he was
Yeah, exactly.
legitimately really excellent, and I think his like the first stretch that he had with Petrie wasn't very good. Like it was actually like the worst numbers that Petrie had posted in his entire career. And then they kind of figured each other out, and Edmondson realized that if he just made quick decisions and made simple choices and deferred to Petrie a lot, things would be really safe. And from that point on, they were excellent together. So I guess, but in terms of finding guys, like I guess if you're looking at plugging holes, you're looking at guys signed like for 1 or 2 years, right? Not like the 4-year
Yeah.
deals they keep handing out to these journeyman defensive defensemen. I mean, that to me speaks to a confidence level in those players that I just wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Right?
But yeah, we're talking about like all those negative things, but the fact is the Abs played a pretty good game tonight. And
Yeah.
that's what's so frustrating. Like the power play was good. The puck movement was great, was crisp. Vegas broke down so many times during this game. The Abs had like so many opportunities to win this game and to close it out, but they just find ways to lose. And that's the thing. If you're Dominique Ducharme right now, I mean, I don't know what's his next move. His next move will be, because you've done kind of everything to win the game, but you can't close it out, and all the bounces are not going your way. So how do you like keep the players motivated after all this?
Yeah, that's like a tough thing, and I feel like I've got on Ducharme a lot during this season, and a lot at times last season when things like weren't going well. And I find he's a coach that doesn't adjust well during games. His hesitancy to use timeouts really frustrates me. But in terms of this game, like, what do you try to fix? Right, the first goal, like, I know it deflected off of Jeff Petrie, but whenever you're beat from far out short side.
Yeah.
That's on Jake Allen, right? He's got to close that hole. Third goal, same thing. He was screened, but it's short side from way out. It's not even a scoring chance.
Exactly.
And then the
third
second
was the
goal,
worst, though.
the second goal was that chaotic pinball.
Yeah. Second
goal
goal.
is insane.
Like,
I think
you can't really like.
Part of this is how snake bit they are, right? Like it's a combination of things. They started off so well, but I feel like we see this not this season. But I felt like we saw this a fair amount last year. Is like they can start off really well, but they don't get out to the lead that you would have thought they'd get out to with that kind of start.
Yes.
And Nicholas, you said it perfect. Like as soon as they get scored on, they panic and they're so fragile. They're so fragile. And that's partially the not having Price back there for sure.
Oh
yeah, I think,
and Weber too.
Yeah, of course. Not having another like top 4 defenseman. Just for facts, like they only have one. They only have one.
And when I say everything is going bad, I say literally everything. Okay, Dvorak gets like a partial breakaway at the end of the game, and somehow Leonard trips him. He goes like full Ashek, no penalty. So that was a goal. If Leonard like doesn't pull that off, I think that could have been a goal. And I mean, Leonard just pulls it off to no penalty. So I mean, everything, every circumstance, name it. It goes against the Canadiens in some way. Ducharme makes a pretty gutsy call. He takes his goalie up the ice pretty early in the third period, relatively speaking. And I think analytically it makes a lot of sense, because you want to. I mean, you have to score a goal at some point. So even if you get scored on, I mean, you're gonna lose. So, just go for it. And that was a pretty sound decision in my eyes. But I mean, it backfired on him like so hard. I mean,
like they won the faceoff.
Yeah, it could not have gone worse. So I don't know, man. I don't even know what to say at this point.
Yeah, it's like they chose the right players to be on the ice. I think you could say like they won the faceoff. They got it to the boards, which is a safe spot. Put it back to the point, and it just manages to hop over Weidman's stick, and he's caught flat-footed. It's just like comedy of. It's not even a comedy of errors. I think that's what's the most frustrating for Canadiens fans watching this game. Is it wasn't a comedy of errors. They had some points where like they had a few defensive breakdowns. I think in that second goal you watch like David Savard tripped himself kind of thing, and then Brett Kulak had a chance to clear the puck and he fanned on it, and it just kind of went back up to the point softly and let Vegas reset. But overall, for a 60-minute game, they didn't make a lot of mistakes. It's just that everything that went wrong ended in the back of the net. And it was kind of the same thing against the Islanders, who I thought they played not nearly as well as tonight, but they played a decent game through at least the first 40 minutes against the Islanders. And again, everything that went wrong went in the back of the net. And I don't put a lot of blame on Allen for the Islanders game. I think every like chance that they got was spectacular, but I think there are points during games in this season, especially at the beginning of the season when like the early goals kept on happening. Those moments, I think Price is a calming presence to the team that it might have changed a few things. You know what I mean? Either that goal doesn't go in, or the goal goes in and he just like, Price is there. You know, he's like, calm down. We can settle this a little bit. And it's not to say that they would be in a playoff position, right? But
you could have an even record. That's something.
Wouldn't be at this point.
It could be still a semi-enjoyable season, which frankly it hasn't been. It's like, to search for positives, you're looking at individual players. And you know what? In the interest of that, let's talk about Nick Suzuki a little bit, because man, that guy, he had a slow start and now he's ripping it up.
Oh yeah,
so
he's
good.
pretty great right now. Well, the thing is, Nick Suzuki, in some stretches of play, I mean, he's a high hockey IQ guy. Okay, he's not gonna beat you with his feet. So what happens is, in some stretches of play, he tends to overthink sometimes on the ice. But now he seems like he's just playing freely, and you really see him reap the rewards on the ice.
I feel like Suzuki, it's like you said it earlier too, in another or in a few of the previous shows, Andrew, that like the jitters, the new contract jitters were definitely kicking in, and he has to get his confidence. And so once he starts playing well, and I think this is why I really harp on, like, if the kids make a mistake, it doesn't matter, just put them back out there. And I feel like Suzuki's gotten the benefit of that doubt, and I wish they do it with others. I'm glad they sent Caulfield down for now, and I hope that when he comes back, he gets the same benefit where he's on again and again, because if you make a mistake and you go back out there, like, these are good players. They're going to recover. They're going to come back and play well. Just give them the chance to get, like, not be in their head so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of points made in the chat here. People are saying the injuries this season are overwhelming. It's true. Like, Drouin out takes away a ton of their playmaking ability.
Yes.
Edmondson, on top of losing Weber, is just, it's a huge blow. Gallagher's playing very clearly injured. Suzuki's also day to day. They're right. Price out to start the year, which is combination injury and being in the player assistance program. And there was a question asking if Price returns Monday. Yes, technically, but he has to pass a physical. Then he's got to get into training, and like, it could still possibly be like a month even before he's in practice.
Yeah, he's gonna need time. The Habs are not gonna rush him.
No,
That's
especially with
sure.
how let's look at positives. The way this season's gone, they don't have to rush him.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Nothing's on the line.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that the injuries, like, I hope the players take as long as they need to heal up, and sometimes it comes back to haunt you. But like all those injuries, but you can't point at some of that is self-inflicted. Like,
Yes.
Again, Weber, you knew Weber was gonna, like, Weber's been injured for how long? You knew that every team gets hit with injuries. You could have kept Dano. Like, you can't
Vegas
blame it all on the injuries. This is a badly managed team. I'm sorry, but it's a badly managed team.
Yeah.
And I think of myself, like, in a workplace, because I'm not an athlete. I can't do any of that stuff. But when you work somewhere and the people who make the decisions are bad at their jobs, and they reward stuff that doesn't make sense, and they punish stuff that doesn't make sense, and there's no consistency, like, how are you gonna... Ducharme getting a 3-year contract on that hot playoff run. How? Why?
Like, I mean, the team made the Stanley Cup Finals. I can understand why. He's a young coach. You need him to stick around for a while. You want stability.
But why? How do you know? Like, first of all, and I said this a lot last year. I kept going on radio shows because I was the fan who the whole time was saying they're gonna lose, not because I want them to lose, but because I was convinced they were gonna lose every round. I was like, Toronto's gonna crush us, Winnipeg's gonna crush us, Vegas is gonna crush us. I just never believed they're gonna win, and because they've broken my heart so many times before. And then even when they got to the final, I was like, look, I want them to win, but they're not gonna, and they're gonna be horrible next year.
Yeah.
And they're horrible this year. Like, everybody's seen hot runs. Like, we saw it with the Sens years ago. We saw it with Edmonton years ago. Those teams didn't stay contenders. You can tell the difference between a hot run and a real contender.
Yeah.
So, like,
I mean, I don't want to like entirely defend everything that Bergevin did, but I still think he didn't have it easy. Your team just made the Stanley Cup Finals, and you lose so many pieces, and you can't just say to the fans, well, this year is not going to be it. We're going to tank. So no, he tried to patch them holes the best he could. But I mean, how do you replace Weber during one off season? You just can't. I mean, the no situation, maybe that was badly managed. I can give you that. But the thing is, He signed Hoffman. That was a pretty good signing,
That
and
was.
he did his best really to patch the holes. And the thing is, when you knew Weber was not going to come back, you had to ask yourself, do I change the identity of this defensive team? Like, do I change the identity of the blue line now that we don't have like Weber's swagger back there? I think it was time to do that, but you didn't really see it. You see the same kind of immobile defense that really sucks in the regular season and is kind of good in the playoffs when you can do pretty much everything. You can pretty much rip someone head off, and yeah. So that's what happened. I think they need to move on from Ben Sherratt. I think they have to think about it. They have to consider it because at the trade deadline, after the trade deadline, if he's still with the team, I don't think they managed it well. He's going to be a UFA, I think. So they need to think about it.
Yeah, this is something like I thought that I always find with Bergevin, there are times where I'm convinced that he's got it. You know what I mean? Like he finally gets it. You know, like he understands where to go, what the plan is, and then he's like, "No, I don't. Actually, I'm gonna go all in on this really bad thing."
He's
You're like,
confusing to follow.
what?
Yeah.
Like, do you remember years ago when he first traded for Petrie, right? And then he had like Nathan Beaulieu when he was actually a good prospect, right? And he was playing more mobile defenseman instead of trying to be the beat 'em up guy, and he acquired like Mark Barberio, who was like a super underrated local kid who came in and he was playing really well. You're like, okay, he's really going heavy on the mobile defenseman. Then he's like Douglas Murray. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
And then they like roll in Douglas Murray in the playoffs, and you're like, seriously?
Yeah.
And they
That's
get outshot like 40-16 or something like that. And
He has some really, really bizarre moments, like this year in the playoffs when he acquired like Steve Ott, Martinson, Dwight King, like to fill up his fourth line, and it really backfired. Like, didn't work at all. He has some like crazy periods where he just does things that confuses the hell out of you, but somehow the next month he's going to make this genius move that is applauded by the analytics community. So he's a very tough act to follow. I do think he's a very good talent evaluator. He knows how to scout guys, but sometimes he doesn't know what to look for. That's the thing.
I think
He
he's
doesn't know how to develop guys, though.
Yeah,
He
that's
might not
I mean,
have
that's not really his job to develop them, though. But he does hire the staff that does the development. So yeah.
I think their philosophy towards development is the big issue more than like, I mean, the staff, but like Bergevin's personal involvement, right? But like the philosophy of the organization, you compare it to Toronto, where it's like they have a coach for everything, right? They have a skating coach, they have skills coaches, they have workshops for the young kids that they work on like their strengths and their weaknesses to develop things. And the Canadians are kind of like, if you're gonna make the NHL, show us.
Yeah.
You know, and
Just
like
think on your own. It's you. It's on you.
Yeah, and guys like Gallagher, of course they make it because they were always gonna make it. Right?
Yeah.
They're always going to be what they were because he's the guy who's going to work through every single thing. He's got that never say die attitude, and you love those guys, but you also have to develop the guys who might not make it without a helping hand, right?
Like
who have maybe
Galchenyuk,
some elite
maybe?
scoring. Yes, some Galchenyuk, a guy who needs that support, who needs not just support in like a hockey sense, but like an off the ice sense, right? Like all those guys, you need to be able to give as many chances as possible.
I mean, if I just look at Romanov, first game in the NHL last year, he comes in, he's decisive with the puck, he moves it really well, stretch pass to Thomas Tatar, who scores on the breakaway. I mean, I thought he looked terrific during his first game, but I mean, you actually saw him regress throughout the year, and he's been even worse this year. So that's not development, that's regression. I mean, how does that work? And yes, Perry Kotkaniemi, I remember like his first games in the NHL, it was so dynamic, making plays, showing his vision. He looked like the next Barkov. And what happens? I mean, he kind of lost his swagger at some point. So you do have to wonder. I mean, Romanov, the big thing Ducharme insists on is, oh, he's so aggressive. He's too aggressive on the ice. He tries to be everywhere at the same time. Well, I would agree, but that's in his nature. Do you really want him to play against that nature? Because he's just going to be indecisive. He's just going to hesitate. And you're not going to be better off telling him that. I would just say, I mean, try to do your best, try to use that energy on the ice and to break up the play. But you cannot tell him to play against his nature, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of square pegs and round holes in the organization,
Yeah.
right? And it's instead of saying you're great at this, but let's focus a little bit on this to like round out
Mhm.
your game a little bit. It's like
Yeah.
we don't like the player that you are, right? Like with
So
Kotkaniemi, it was
why
like,
did you draft him? Why
yeah,
did you trade for him?
exactly.
Like they bring these guys in and then they're like, now everything that you're good at, forget that. Do this instead. You're
Yes.
all little board players and you should all play like this, except for like you two, you get to be different, but everybody else like this.
They cannot live with weaknesses. Just play around those weaknesses and focus on the strong elements of their game. Just accept the fact that there are going to be some weaknesses. If you want a perfect player, but well, chances are he's going to be bland if he has no weaknesses. He's going to be Christian Dvorak.
And his upside is going to be here. Like,
Yeah,
you can't,
exactly.
This is the thing, right? They are so conservative. They're so conservative. They don't want anybody who's like, okay, high risk, high reward. And honestly, I feel like in today's NHL, that gets you more success than the guys that have a very low ceiling. But they are obsessed with like, don't make any mistakes. Okay, but then you're also not going to score. And this is why the pressure's on the goalie. Like, oh, the second the other team scores one goal, that's it. The Habs are out of it. Like, that's how can you play under that pressure?
Well, and that's kind of been the feeling for how many seasons now. You know, like if they allow the first goal, it's like, oh, they can't come back now because they've got no scoring punch. And you look at like the additions that they've made, and it just seems like there's like you hope Caulfield becomes that guy, but they haven't really been that interested in acquiring more than one of those guys that can actually add that punch.
Even when they do have Caulfield, they used him on the power play. He was on the ice, but he was barely involved in the schemes that they were using on the ice on the power play. I mean, it was pretty much Petrie shooting from the point and not even like barely looking at him. It was so frustrating. And the fact that they didn't even entertain the idea of playing both Caulfield and Hoffman the whole 2 minutes of the power play. I'm just kind of shocked that they didn't even entertain the idea. It's not like your power play is clicking right now. So when they had Caulfield, they never did it. I mean, it shocks me, really. I don't understand why they would not even entertain that idea.
Yeah,
it
your
is
power
weird.
play's been horrible for how many years, and you've got a guy who's like an amazing shooter, like a sniper, basically. And then no, that's just not going to use him. Let's just keep it to the point, even when we don't have the guy who shoots it from the point. Yeah. Although, to be fair, today's power play did not look like that for the first time that I've seen in ever.
Well, yeah, they had some interesting action. I like how they used that guy on the goal line. The puck moved laterally instead of just like, just take this puck down, just bring it back to the point.
I love how low the bar is, though.
Yeah.
The puck moved laterally, and it was below the face-off circle.
It's all we've got, Andrew.
I mean.
Oh my God.
I mean, they did look good on the power play though tonight. Legitimately, it's one of those games where like Robin Lehner was good, the bounces were horrible, and I think there was like 3 different empty nets where they just roofed it over. I think Savard had one in the first. I know Toffoli had another one. And I think there was another one as well. Maybe Hoffman.
Well, Gallagher had a great chance too at the end of the second.
Then he just shot right into Leonard's pads. It's one of those situations where it's like in that moment you're the wrong-handedness, right? If he was a lefty, he could have just easily tucked it around. But
Evans missed a good rebound, like a nice big juicy rebound. I think
on Mike Hoffman's shot.
It's like, and this is one of those frustrations where, especially when you have some injuries, right? Like, and they do have some injuries. We have to talk about like that's just a difficult situation, but the whole scoring depth thing that they had at the beginning, or that they thought they had coming into the season, like when you're down a goal and you've got 2 minutes left and Jake Evans is on the ice, no offense to Jake Evans, who I like, but should not be out in that situation.
Yeah.
And like, I've liked Hoffman so far this year, and I understand what they're trying to do with flipping Evans onto that line and Dvorak down a line at even strength. I think it's a waste because you look at that the last game, and they didn't spend the whole game together because they made that decision to flip Dvorak down a line. But that Evans, Lekin, and Armia line is a perfect fourth line. Unfortunately, they have to be the third line right now, but they are a killer forechecking line that just like eats time like crazy. And they were fantastic in the playoffs. I thought Ducharme was really smart for reuniting them. And like when everyone was health, well, not everyone, but when there was enough health in the lineup, I thought Ducharme's decision to unite Suzuki and Gallagher was also really smart. Like he's made some really good decisions so far this season. It's just that still nothing works. And
I don't feel like
sucks.
it's on Ducharme. Like I'm saying, to clarify, when I said like, why would you give him a 3-year extent? I don't.
Yeah, I get that.
It's not Ducharme might be fine. It's more that like they seem like they've already made up their minds about who's going to work, whether in coaching or playing, and who's not going to work before they actually give those guys a chance to do what they're going to do. So like, I don't think this mess of a season is on Ducharme. I think it's on Bergevin. I've thought everything's on Bergevin for years. And Nicholas, I get your point about like he tried in the off season, like in a year to replace, but he's been the GM for what, 10 years? So I don't think he can lay it at anyone else's feet at this point, whatever it is.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Weber, right? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. But with Weber, like we talk about, it's impossible to replace him in one off season, and it is legitimately it is. But like you brought up earlier, Noah, who knows about Weber's injury history more than the Montreal Canadiens do? They deal with it every training camp. They're the ones who are probably supplying him medication to get him through these games. Like people talk about his pain tolerance all last year, in the last 2 years, really. You see media talking about Shea Weber's incredible pain tolerance, and it's like, what? Why are they talking about that all the time? It's like, because the guy can barely move, until he gets maybe a cortisone shot in that foot. So they had time to either attempt to draft and develop somebody in 5 years or make a move within those last 5 years to replace Shea Weber. They didn't do it. I don't want to say they didn't try, because they could have tried behind the scenes and not found a deal, but they definitely failed. And on that, like Bergevin just has to sit, like there's no way out of it.
No, that's on him. And the development part of it, a bit, I said he's not like, his work is not to develop players. That's on his staff, but it's still on him because he can make some things to like stir things up and change things. But although we talked about Ducharme personal decisions, so I wanted to touch on that. I was pretty bummed that that Drouin was a scratch again tonight, because I'm really curious about how he can fit in at center. And in the short sample we saw before he left the game, I actually liked him at center. I thought he could do some good things. And we talk in our conversation during the game on how Dvorak game is pretty bland, how he doesn't have like enough offensive talent maybe to fit as a second center. But can Drouin fill that spot? That would help for sure.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing anything that Drouin can do right now, because I just think he's a bit of a changed player. You can see there's just energy with him. And I thought even last season, at least to start the year, was the best hockey that he'd played with the Montreal Canadiens to that point. Like just his reads defensively. I know he wasn't scoring goals, but like his reads were fantastic, and he was always a really terrible defensive player. And I think he's continued that this year, and he's brought a lot more offensive pop at even strength than he has before. There's still limitations to his game. We've talked about before, but like he kind of struggles to create off the rush because he likes to go wide, and instead of continue driving down and finding a passing lane, he pulls up on the half boards, and sometimes he can catch guys and kind of find a streaking player. But if you don't create that lane and everyone knows that you're going to stop up at the half boards, they just stop up with you and then take the puck away because they're like the defenseman is stronger than you. And that's what happens often with him. But overall, like I really like Drouin's game. His creativity through the middle of the ice is something that the Canadiens probably need, right?
They don't have that. Yeah.
No, they don't. I like the line of Drouin with Dvorak and Anderson, but at this point, you got to try anything, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's the time to try.
They do. Yeah, exactly. Like, what are you going to lose? What are you going to lose? More games?
Games, yeah. And they can afford to lose games, I guess.
Yeah, feels like it.
It's rough. I feel bad. I feel bad for everyone who's like really emotionally invested, especially people who like kind of got their hope back during last year's playoffs. Because I think it's been a really tough few years for this organization, right? I think the fan base kind of fractured when they made their big Weber Subban trade, and you saw that kind of follow through just based on like online interaction. You know, like it just hasn't been as like the high points haven't hit as high. There was got a little bit of it with Radulov, right? But since then, it hasn't really like there hasn't been a lot of belief in what the team is doing, what like the direction that they're going. People liked Weber, obviously, he was great, but the whole team as it stood, it was like too modeled on that one style, right? And last year, obviously, things went crazy because they went to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 1993, and then to just have this like a curb stomp on top of the curb stomp that was the Stanley Cup final is just like rubbing your face in it. Like, actually, there's no hope, and they're probably not even going to get a good pick this year because they traded that top pick to the Arizona Coyotes. You know, like.
So everyone's coming over to my pessimistic dark side, is what you're saying. You know, through all the playoffs, as much as I completely, like I said, didn't believe. I wanted them to win, but I didn't think they could every series. And my 10-year-old was always like, you have to believe, Mama. And this is like the most optimistic kid in the world who the second they will like get into the offensive zone is like, they're going to score. And I'm like, oh, you sweet, poor, sweet, innocent child who thinks that, you know, they're good enough that they have a chance just because they've entered the zone. I'm like, they're just going to leave the zone again. But even him this season, he lost hope after the playoffs. And that's saying a lot. That's like how bad it's been, because
that's grim. Yeah.
You never want the children to give up.
You know, I think there's one person in Montreal that still believes in this team, and oddly, it's Carey Price. When the Canadiens were down 3-1 against the Leafs, there was one player that still believed in that team, and it was Carey Price. He said, he was rambling about how the players scored on him often during practice. I mean, he knew they had talent and they would come back from this. He believed in it, and it actually happened. So, I mean, it's strange. Price can come back and change a lot of things, I think, because he still believes. I'm pretty sure he's going to be pretty involved in those games. He's going to work pretty hard.
And I think that's it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like, why wouldn't they commit to actually tanking? And I think while Weber was around and while Price is around, and Price is still around, I think that it's a very difficult choice when they're in their mid to late 30s, right? When you're like, you're going to lose the veterans. Yeah. Can I really go to this guy and say, I'm going to waste the rest of your career on a rebuild? Yeah. And I understand that hesitation from the Canadiens, but at the same time, I feel like if you're going to say we're going to try to like win it one last time for Weber and Price, you have to go all in. And they haven't done that either. They've done a decent job stockpiling draft picks the last couple of years. And like their prospect pool is seemingly decent, but again, like outside of Caulfield, there's not really a lot of
no
star
absolute
potential.
Dodge,
yeah. So it's like, how much are those picks really worth compared to actually going all in for Price and Weber and getting them that last real chance at a Stanley Cup? And it's one of those situations where like you cannot have your foot on both sides of the line. It just does not work. You have to be all in, either rebuild the team or be competitive. And this idea of the Canadiens just like straddling mediocrity and just making the playoffs and maybe something magical will happen. Something magical did happen, but magic doesn't last forever. Sometimes you have to go up against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they've got that magic too, and they're also way better.
And the thing is, I read a tweet by Connor McKenna. It was either, I can't remember, yesterday, today, where he said the embarrassing thing about the Habs is that, like, compared to all the other teams that are playing really badly, is they spent to the cap. This is what they tried to be good, and this is where they ended up this year. So this is why I'm saying I don't even mean rebuild, like commit to tanking, but just instead of going and signing a bunch of middle of the range players, like, okay, you need a couple of those, hand the reins over to the kids and see what happens. It can't be worse than this is. Like, I'm sorry, they're 3-10. Like, it can't be worse than this. It's how much worse is it going to be?
Yeah.
Well, in this case, we might see a bit of Mathias Norlinder in the next few games. He's gonna play a game or two in Laval for his conditioning, but pretty sure we might see him. It's not like Chris Weinman is on a roll right now and he's really killing it. So they're gonna test all the offensive D-men they have in the system.
Yeah, and
Like,
there was a comment on the
not just
YouTube
a
channel.
game or two.
What?
There was a
I'm sorry?
comment on the YouTube chat here saying that the extra magic that Tampa had was $20 million in extra salary. Like it's partially true. You know, they had the Kucherov thing, but part of that salary was dead salary, right? Like I think they had
Yeah.
it wasn't Marian Gaborik. I think he was in the Senators, but there was like a couple different dead contracts that they had that didn't impact anything at all. And also the Canadians were over the cap last year in the playoffs too. It's just that Drouin wasn't playing.
Well, if you want to be that much over the cap, I guess you can draft Nikita Kucherov. I mean, just go ahead and do it while you can.
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
draft those guys, and you're gonna be over the cap a lot.
And
a
we
good
talked-
situation to be in.
And we talked about the Lightning. It was either the last show or the one before. That like, you want to talk about a team that does well scouting Quebec?
Yeah.
The Tampa Bay Lightning do well scouting Quebec, better than the Montreal Canadiens do. And actually, you know what? It's unfair because I know, Nicolas, you're the first French Canadian.
Yeah,
we've
I'm
had
the
on
first
show so
French
far.
you bring on.
So
yeah.
I don't want to bring up too much of the French content, but I have seen a lot of stuff going around on social media lately that it bugs me. And I'm saying this as somebody who was raised in Western Canada, whose French is terrible. But like the narrative surrounding the team of like, oh well, they only brought in like the stuff that's killing them is like bringing in like Paquette and Savard.
Thank you.
It's such garbage, and I'm so tired of it. And I wish this fan base wouldn't key on it.
It's
because
not what's bringing this team down. I mean, stop it. And I mean, I'm sensitive about the language issue because I mean, if you have like a family in Rouyn-Noranda, well, it's fair for them to want to understand the coach, to understand what the GM is. It's just a matter of respect to me. And I don't think we're at the point where there's like not enough good hockey guys in Quebec where that drags the team down. And we have good hockey players too in Quebec. Well, and I don't think you have to draft them all or sign them all. Just make a conscious effort out of it and a reasonable effort. Just don't go over the top. And I mean, there's some guys out there on Twitter, obviously, that want the team to be like half French. Okay, and that's not reasonable. Just make a conscious effort out of it and scout extensively in the QMJHL, and it'll be just fine.
Just find the diamonds in the rough. I feel like that's
exactly
the least of the responsibility that you have. And this is a point that I made to Marc-Antoine Gaudin on Twitter was every single team that has the capacity to bring in local players, that has a local player pool, tries to bring in local players. Ottawa is filled with people from like the Ottawa Valley. Like they always scout those guys. They always try to bring in those guys. You think Toronto doesn't try to bring in Torontonians? Why do you think Wayne Simmons was a big priority for them? Like,
of course. The
only reason it's such a focus in Montreal is because it's very clear when somebody is a francophone, right? You could tell from their name. You could tell from the way that they speak.
From my thick accent, for example.
Exactly. And like I hear talk all the time, like, oh, well, they gotta go outside of this French requirement for the coach thing or the GM thing. And I understand it a tiny bit for the coaching because it's a small pool of candidates, right? And
you don't have a that large of a pool, right. And for the GM position too. I mean, you don't have on the top of my head. I'm not thinking of like too much candidates right now. They even like they even bring up Daniel Brière, who's just recently started to like be a GM in the ECHL. There's Mathieu Darche. Of course, the big name would be Martin Madden-Fils. But otherwise, you don't have you don't have too many names. We
could lure Julien Brisebois.
Back up the Brinks truck.
They had him just like they had the Guy Boucher back in the day. So
they've made some mistakes with letting guys go. I think like if I'm the coaching thing, I understand the idea of it because it's a small pool, but like that's the one that I think is most important to speak French because you're meeting the media every day, like twice a day. You have to speak the language of the land. Now, I think that if somebody was an Anglophone or from another country altogether, Europe, and they came in and they learned French on the fly, I don't think people would be upset. I think that would be fine.
No, that would be fine. Yeah, if you make a conscious effort to to learn French, I mean, that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and as far as the GM goes, my question always comes back to what's the more limiting factor for having a small pool of candidates? Is it that you want somebody who's able to speak French, or is it that you want a former hockey player? Right? Like, what's
Yeah.
actually your limiting factor there? I would say if you want to
Yep.
find one of the better GMs in the game, find the next Julien Brisebois. He didn't play
Yeah.
high-level hockey. He's a lawyer.
Well, the thing I could tell you, Andrew, is that it helps with connections if you're a former hockey player. Like Marc
100%.
Bergevin, he pretty much knows everyone in the freaking game. He played for so many teams. So that helps if he knows, oh, this agent, oh, he played with that guy back in the days. So that helps for chemistry when he negotiates. So these connections helped him in Montreal. But yeah, you can still have guys like Julien Brisebois that didn't play the game at the pro level at least, and they're just so smart that they compensate for it.
Yeah, and
Well,
I think
and I
that's what I
think-
want, right? Is the smart guy,
Yes.
and you can surround
Exactly.
yourself with hockey people, right? I want the best manager.
Yeah,
And I
you're right.
guarantee
You
you
surround
can
yourself
find-
with these guys. Yeah,
Exactly. I guarantee you could find an absolutely stupendous manager in Quebec, a francophone, doesn't matter. You could limit the scope as much as you want, as long as it's not former hockey player, and you could
Yes.
probably find one of the best managers in the entire league.
And even
totally
aside
agree.
from the language, like that's not even just, that's not a Quebec hockey issue. That's a hockey issue, that people are
Yeah.
obsessed with hiring former players.
Yeah.
And it's like the talk about, hey, let's freaking Patrick Waugh. I'm like, please don't. What an amazing player. What an absolute winner of a
Yeah.
player. But please do not make him like, no. It's
That
not a
depends.
good-
Like, do you want to watch the world burn?
Yeah, I mean
That would be
it'd
pretty entertaining.
it'd be
I mean,
very
we would have
entertaining.
fun.
Fair enough.
We
But
would have
I
fun.
always think of the poor players and
Yeah.
actually having to play under those guys. Like,
Yeah.
again, whoever is managing that organization, like, needs to know how to manage.
I could
Yeah.
just imagine if Marc Bergevin was the GM when that empty netter went in tonight, there would have been like a table that flew through the box onto the ice. I will say, like, I am very unsure about the idea of Patrick Waugh,
Yeah.
but I think he'd bring a lot of passion back to the
Oh,
fan
he
base.
would. He would. And he did
he's one of
mature
those guys who,
over the
like-
years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I feel like bringing him in some capacity is interesting to me, not as general manager.
Yeah, I mean, that would light a fire, I'm pretty sure. And he did mature over the years. He's not like the same Roy we knew back in the day. But, well, I'm saying that, but I think it was last night or a couple of days ago, we got kicked out of the game. So maybe we'll have to reconsider that.
Yeah. I'm not sure he has another gear. Like, I agree that if he came back not as GM, but I also don't know if he'd agree to come back as anything less. Like, he's Patrick Waugh. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
I mean, in Colorado, he was the coach and he still had input on like roster
Yeah,
decisions.
well,
Like,
they
wants to be
acquired
in charge.
Renko because of him.
Yeah.
And I think he left because Joe Sakic didn't want anything to do with Radulov. That was part of the misunderstandings they had back in the day.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, Radulov has some issues, but I feel like I'd be willing to. He's so
Oh.
good that you kind of you
Yeah.
let it go, right? There was a comment on the chat here. Matt Wilson asks, Marc Bergevin worked for the Blackhawks in 2010. Thoughts? I've given my thoughts on that. I don't want to get too far into the Blackhawks situation right now because we're kind of having a good time, and
Yeah.
it's like I've talked about it on the show a couple of times. I think he needs to talk about it. I think the fact that he refused to meet with the media when he was asked is not great. It's a bad look. I think in combination with drafting Logan Mailloux this season is a really bad look. I think that he's made some acquisitions in the organization like Nick Cousins and Sean Burke that have bad off-ice histories.
Oh, yeah.
That it's he seems
think
to
he
have a
also
blind
went
spot at
after,
the very least. I don't want to imply any guilt in his association there. He was not mentioned in the report, but I also think it's probably unlikely that he didn't know.
And then he also went after, oh my goodness, his name's escaping me, the player that Carolina ended up signing.
Tony DeAngelo.
Thank you. Yes. So like,
Yeah.
I really, what he knew and what he didn't know, there's no way for us to really know. But in terms of like the general issue about hockey culture and about the culture of, especially someone like Marc Bergevin, who goes on and on about character.
Yes.
I can't take anything he says about character seriously after drafting Logan
you're
Mailloux,
right.
like ever. So,
But Bergevin has this weird habit of like playing white knight and thinking he can like save a player. Like, I'm gonna save you, I'm gonna rehabilitate you, but it's not your job to do that. It's not your job to give him that opportunity. I think that's where the misunderstanding lies. He's out there and he's like, oh, I'm saving players, I'm doing the right thing, but no, that's not actually what's happening right there. And even for Logan Mailloux, I don't even think he like I think it did him the service to draft him. So
it did.
what are
And
you
I
even
also say,
doing? Yeah.
you like, who does he think is worth saving and who does he not, right? When you look at PK Subban and the way that they talked about his character and made him sound like he was a cancer in the dressing room, same with Max Pacioretty, but then they look at someone like Logan Mailloux and say, oh, this is a kid worth saving, this is someone worth redeeming. I'm like, I don't, your judgment of character, I'm not so I don't buy into it.
Not sold on it.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing, is like, they've made these decisions, but who can we point to in the organization that they've elevated? You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I remember like the first press conference when they hired Michel Therrien and they talked about how he was going to make PK Subban a better person. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that was hard to watch. I did not, that was very, very uncomfortable. Not good.
That's true.
Yeah, so the organization doesn't exactly have a great record. Somebody saying D'Angelo apparently didn't want to play in Montreal. I mean,
that was at the trade deadline. I think Bergevin pretty much had a deal to bring D'Angelo in, but he didn't want to come to Montreal. So D'Angelo could have been playing with the Habs last year. In fact, in the last playoffs, that was before even Logan Mailloux.
I mean, D'Angelo probably thinks Quebec is like some communist place, right? Like, there's no way he'd want to come here.
Oh yeah, he must be pretty scared of Quebec. Yeah,
it's like the students protest over cheap tuition. Like,
you're telling me I can go to the hospital for free? What is this sorcery?
Oh man, way too funny. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all glad that didn't happen. I believe there was actually reports that the Canadiens were interested in Slava Voinov when he was trying to get back in the NHL as well. And that was disputed, but I talked to one of the reporters who was very, very adamant that there were discussions.
Well, I have a colleague at TVA Sports who reported that, and he's pretty confident in his informations. Yep.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the same person, I believe.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah, so he was very confident with me as well when I talked to him in DMs, and he was like, 100%. And the people who are trying to discredit me are carrying water. And I was like, whoa,
yeah,
heavy, but yes, probably. But there's the character stuff in Montreal is like, there's some guys, like, I feel like Shea Weber is a guy that you can't knock his character. Like, it's clear that he is the guy that they thought that he was, and the way that the players talk about him. The fact that everyone called him dad. You know, like Carey Price, absolutely fantastic leader. I mean, we talked in the chat before the game, like how tough it is to play in Montreal and the spotlight that's on you and the way that media and fans react to things, how tough it is. And like the fact that it took Carey Price so long to like trip up is incredible to me.
One thing I do like about Bergevin, though, is that in this era where like men sometimes don't feel like comfortable showing their emotion or whatever, he's a pretty emotional guy.
I agree.
And he's really very open with his emotions. And I think deep down, he's a good person that really cares about his players. He's made big mistakes. I'm not going to dispute that, but I think deep down, he's a good person that really, really, really cares about his players. And he cried about his players a few times on air. He showed himself pretty vulnerable countless times.
Yeah,
I do
100%.
appreciate his emotion. I do appreciate his emotion. It's hard for me to overlook the treatment of some people versus others.
And this is fair. This is perfectly fair too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I try to like look at Bergevin, it's so hard to figure out what his legacy is, right? Because you look at the lack of development through the draft, despite the fact that he said they were going to build through the draft, like for the first 4 years of his tenure, and they've developed like Lehkonen, Jake Evans,
His
maybe
legacy is
Romanov
the
and
trades,
Caulfield.
Andrew. His
Hmm?
legacy is the trades, and his legacy is
Yes,
Shea
yes.
Weber.
That's the thing,
That's
right?
the
Like
part. Yeah.
you look at the lack of development, and then you're like, oh wow, he's terrible. And then you look at like he got Phil Deneau for Dale Weiss and Thomas Fleischman, and also Matthias Norlinder was part of that trade. So you're like, oh, he's a genius. And I think that's
Yeah.
why it's so frustrating to cover this team, is because there are
Yeah.
moments of absolute brilliance, and then it just gets dragged down.
Absolutely. Yep.
I just think at the end of the day, when you look at the number of times they've made the playoffs and the number of rounds they've won, like if you've got the one run to the finals, and other than that, what do you have?
They did the conference finals in 2014.
2014, I think they beat the Bruins in the second round, which was pretty cool. I mean, Subban scored on the breakaway, coming out of the box.
That was under his tenure?
Yeah, that was
that was under his
2014,
tenure.
and
Yeah.
Then Price got injured against the Rangers. So like that,
Yes.
theoretically, they could have
Prior.
been in the Stanley Cup final twice. Like, I
And
think-
you know, the year Claude Julien took over, they lost in the first round against the Rangers. It was a pretty tight series, and obviously Longvis stole the show. I think if they went through the Rangers that year, it's easy to say they could have made a run too. That was a good team back in the day. They still had Markov, they had the Radulov, Pacioretty. They had a couple of great players, so I think they could have made a run. But yeah, his legacy would be the Stanley Cup final, obviously, and Shea Weber. That's pretty much his
yeah,
legacy.
and I feel like you even look at that first year with Weber, where they made the playoffs, and maybe if they hadn't spent the deadline acquiring guys like Martinson and Steve Ott, they
Yeah.
might have been a little bit better in the playoffs as well.
Yeah,
Dwight was
it's
bad.
those things. It's that obsession with like big lumbering,
Mhm.
low skill players that I'm like, why?
Yeah, and it's all
Well,
right
I
to
will
have a
give them
couple.
that. It worked in the last playoffs.
Yeah, it did.
It worked in the last playoffs. I have to
But
give
how
them
much
that.
of that was Price, though? Right?
That's what
A
I
lot.
think.
And,
a lot
and
of
the
it,
fact that they
but
didn't have
yeah.
any games like this one, right, where they massively
Yeah.
outplayed teams and lost. Like, I think you look back.
Well,
at-
Winnipeg, they outplayed them, like they really outplayed.
yeah, but they didn't lose. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah,
they didn't
yeah.
have
Oh,
any-
yeah. I
any
see where
bad
you're
luck
going.
games, right?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah, that Winnipeg series was phenomenal for the Canadiens.
Yeah.
That was probably the
And
best
They,
they've
they
played
were
in
actually really
10
tough
years.
to play against.
Oh, 100% they were tough to play against.
So yeah, but does that work in the regular season though? Because they barely made the playoffs in the weak division last year with that style of play. I feel that that's a style that's really working in the playoffs exclusively, not during like 82 games of regular season, because you cannot physically. You cannot physically play like that for 82 games anyway. So that's why I think you need to kind of change the identity of the defense, because you can't have that style for 82 games, because you have to get in the playoffs somehow, and they can't do that with the current makeup of the blue line.
Well, and even if that style is working, you still need your goaltender to be putting up like a 940 save percentage, right? Because
Yeah.
like-
You're right.
Price was absolutely incredible. And I think it was like before the Tampa series, his save percentage while the Canadiens were shorthanded in the playoffs, it was like 96%. And it's like, he was fantastic, but like that obviously can't
Not
last forever.
sustainable.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
just
They
nuts.
need help.
Wow.
Jeff Petrie needs help. Like,
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know, what do we do? Start like a petition, like get Jeff Petrie help. Like, he needs help. I feel so bad for him. Every time I see him, maybe it's from the red eyes. But ever since, every time I see him, I'm like, the poor guy, somebody help Jeff Petrie. Like he's out there all by himself.
he looks so sad all the times too.
He does look sad. He looks sad,
Yeah.
right? He looks like he's carrying the weight of the entire D and he's dragging them, kicking and screaming, come on, guys, out of our zone, out of our zone.
Petrie really needs Edmondson right now. It's crazy. Edmondson's actually Petrie has had some problems with a lot of partners over the years, but there's one guy he played amazing hockey with, and it's Edmondson. He cannot wait for him to come back.
Yeah, I mean, he's had some good times with Kulak as well, but I think Kulak
Yes,
is just
but
not a
not right
permanent
now.
guy there, right? And
Yeah.
he's a guy who can jump in spots. I don't think he fits very well with Sherratt. I think Sherratt's just like a bit too erratic,
No.
whereas Edmondson is very predictable. And yeah, I mean, he had a very, very short stint with Markov where the two of them were murderers out there. And then they were like, let's put Markov with Weber instead. But yeah, I think Petrie's a great player.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Pete. I mean, you have to get Petrie going if you want to win games at this point. He's your only potent offensive demon.
Yeah,
He's
it's like it's
literally
him and
it.
Suzuki are the two most important players on the team right now.
Exactly. They don't get going, you lose. Simple as that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, I think we're probably gonna have to wrap it up because I've kept you guys way too long, and
Oh,
I
that's fine.
really
That's fine.
appreciate you. I've had an absolute blast talking with you both today. Before I let you go, though, actually, I think we had some rapid fire questions. I should probably get to that
Okay,
because
yeah.
the Discord sends some stuff. They say, "What do the Habs need to do to get the boys to play?" They did play tonight, right? Like I thought they played really well. Like that's the rough
Someone
thing,
needs
right?
to find whatever voodoo doll that like was put, with a Habs jersey into it, pull out the the pins, and then maybe they're not so snake bit. I don't know.
I think they need to take the edge up. Like, didn't Charbonneau like schedule like bowling games when they played really bad?
Yeah, but he got fired like a day after that.
Yeah. Well, I guess just play bowling, take the edge off. Just don't think about the game too much right now because it's not gonna do you any good.
Yeah, they need to relax 100%. They need to have fun. I think that's super important right now. They've got a 2-day break before their next game. They should go out on the town or something.
Yeah,
Just
go out, like see a movie. I don't know.
Yeah, don't think about hockey and approach the next game the same way you approach this one. It's going to be a tougher team because the Golden Knights are not very good without their entire top line, but they just got to relax a little bit and stop thinking so much. I think that they're actually the last 3 games making a lot of progress. It just doesn't look like it via the scoreline. Before I let you go, first Nicolas and then Noha, tell us what you have going on in hockey right now, or where can people find you?
Well, I work for TVA Sports. I mostly produce content for our website, tvasport.ca. So I conduct interviews and I guess my niche, the niche that I found during the pandemic, is interviewing Habs prospects, making them known to our fans because they don't all have the time and the chance to see them, whether it's live or online. So that's pretty much what I've been doing. I have this segment too on one of our show, which is called JC. It's called Les Recrues, and I pretty much debate with Anthony Martineau every week on Wednesdays.
Nice.
Yep.
Very cool.
Noha?
I'm a fan, so I have angry ranting on Twitter, usually anti-Bergevin ranting or stuff of that sort. But I've been super into all the conversation around all the changes that need to happen in hockey. So you've been forewarned. You're going to find a lot of that, and then a lot of laughing at memes and a lot of mix of hockey and non-hockey stuff. My Twitter handle is HockeyHitchAbby.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. And thanks everyone who came in and watched on this Saturday night. It was a lot of fun. We're still having fun on this show, even though the Canadians are not giving us much to work with.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a blast.